welcome to PentaLive from Pentalog. I'm Peter Green in New York. I'm here today with Jeff Mignon, who is the Chief Growth Officer of Pentalog. This is just the latest in our series, what we call War Room, which is to bring you advice and strategies that can help you survive, and not just survive, but thrive in the era of COVID-19, when everything is changing faster than you can even think about it. We'll be right back with Jeff after this little bit of music. All right, Jeff, welcome to PentaLive from Pentalog, and specifically to what we call War Room. You are the Chief Growth Officer at Pentalog, and you're going to talk to us today about something called a growth sprint. I think people who are familiar with Agile, this concept, a different way of working companies, and in particular IT, are very comfortable with the idea of a sprint. But a growth sprint is something that takes it to a whole nother level across an entire entity, an entire company. So maybe you could just start by telling us, what is a growth sprint?
So, hey, Peter. So as you mentioned, Peter, the growth sprint is it's a new version, basically, of the Agile traditional sprint. So we have been inspired by we have been inspired by different approaches right now on the market, and growth is one, Agile is another one. Design sprint is another one. So that's where the inspiration is coming from. So to go to the point, the growth sprint introduce a different concept into the traditional sprint. And I would say the first concept is to make, in the parameter of a project, is to have one backlog for the entire team. So you don't have the marketing working on the roadmap. You don't have the UX working on another roadmap. You have one backlog in which you mix the different tasks of the different teams, but they work together and they work at the same rhythm, which is the sprint, basically. So that's the first things that we introduce into the sprint.
I'll ask you another question first, just for truth in advertising. Jeff is actually, although he's French, he's coming to us from Manhattan, despite you think he's in Dumbo. So just so you know where he really is. But tell me a little the sprint, who's in charge of organizing everybody. But when you start bringing in all these other elements and even other divisions of the company, how do you organize all that in a growth sprint without it sort of getting out of hand and still being a light enough framework to be, or an agile enough framework, I was trying to avoid that word, to be able to sprint?
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to bring the news to you, Peter. I'm American. So just for you to know that I was born in France and I have an accent, but I'm American, and I'm proud of being American. Well, maybe what I should, before I answer your question, I'm sorry to do it this way, I should add what you can find into the growth sprint. So first I said, I promise I'm going to answer the question. First I said that what you do, you have one backlog by project for the entire team. So it's you break the silo, if you wish. It's one backlog. And the second thing that you find in the sprint that we have been inspired by work that is being done by the author of Growth Hacking, hacking growth to be precise, we add a concept of a scoring system, because one of the issues when you do you choose what goes into the backlog, one of the issues is how do you decide what goes into the backlog, and even if it could be a bit controversial what I'm gonna say, but I would say by experience, and maybe I haven't seen many. I mean, I've seen a lot of companies in a lot of countries, but the way things are being chosen in the backlog are often either the concept of the hypo, the guy with the highest paying job opinion, or is the guy with the most influence. Well, it lacks a bit of systematic approach to decide what goes in the backlog with a business point of view. So we introduce a score that we call the DICET score that has been inspired by the ICE score, and we are just adding some criteria for around the ICE score, which is dollar and time to money. The third thing that goes into the backlog is the concept of you have to test, and you have to test permanently. So we added to this concept of growth sprint to systematically add a lot of tests into the backlog that we call MVT, minimum viable test. So I'm aware that for some company, native digital company, everything I'm saying is not a news, but for many, many companies, this approach, this systematic approach of having a unique one backlog for the entire team, everybody working in agile, everybody working, deciding through one scoring system to prioritize what goes into the backlog. It's a new approach.
So just to explain what Jeff was talking about dice set, the original idea was ICE would impact, confidence, and ease of use. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze here. It's springtime in New York. With dice set, you add the dollars or the price at the beginning, and you talk about time to money at the end, so that it's really focused on getting the biggest bang for your buck with this process. But what I wanted to ask you, Jeff, was you had spoken to me about an example where you had worked on a media company's website, and because there were still these silos, even though it was a very technologically forward-looking company, you arrived at some pretty ridiculous situations, and maybe that example could help take us further.
Yeah. So in fact, why did I come to the concept of the growth sprint? And of course, I'm not the only one coming to this concept. And but why? So I have several examples that I can give you. So yes, so we were working for a media company, and 9 months into the roadmap, we were in charge of developing the website of the company, and 9 months into 8 months, 9 months into the process, we were still waiting for the design, for the UX and the UI, because basically the UX UI team could not follow the speed at which we were making progress into the project, And then not only they are late, and not only they cannot catch up with us, but when they end up proposing something to us, they are still working on the basic on the requirements that we had at the beginning of the project. And of course, because we are agile and we are learning while we are walking, the requirements have been moving nonstop, sprint after sprint. So not only they were late, but on top of that, they were the design they produced, the UX they produced was obsolete. So I say, wow, all this effort to get there, and I say, it's where I started to say that we have an issue. Maybe a second example also is one of my clients that is calling me and telling me, hey guys, we need to change the roadmap. I say, oh, well, what's going on? I say, listen, my salespeople keep listening our clients asking for specific features for months and months, and they started to say that we have the feature, we are building this feature. So Jeff, we need to build the features. And when I realized that nobody in the team, in the agile team, had a clue about what the salespeople were facing, and nobody had a clue that the salespeople were selling something that did not exist yet in the roadmap, and this. No, this other client also told me, all right, Jeff, it is great, your velocity, with development, but am I spending the money at the right place? Well, how can you show me the return on investment on this velocity? I'm going fast at developing stuff, but this is great, but am I developing the right stuff from this point of view? So all these little examples that I'm giving you have been driving me to think that not only we need to work better together, but there's a systematic way of approaching the problem that has been wrong. We cannot have one team that is working waterfall and another team that is working waterfall. All these teams in silo with one team working agile, everybody needs to work at the same rhythm and according to the same principles, So that's the growth sprint. And of course, what has to drive everything, it's business. It's a company. We are here to make money, to generate revenue and to generate profit margin. That's what we do. So how do I know that my job every day contributes to that?
So talk to me a little bit about how the DICET score would work in a project.
So to be very simple, and so again, has been inspired by the I score. And when we were doing the I score at the beginning, we realized that we were missing or we were feeling we were missing, because I don't want to say the high score is bad. It's a good principle. We were missing some more revenue and time to money concept. So basically, when you develop an MVT, so the die set score is for an MVT, so a minimum viable test, something that you can test within the span of a sprint. So it's a concept, the MVT, maybe first to break down a project into pieces in order for you to measure on the fly, sense and respond, the progress, the appetite, the engagement of your audience. Do they like what you are trying to do, or do you have to spend more money and energy? So the way we measure each MVT is using the die set score. So each parameter of the die set score, so D for dollars, impact, ease, confidence, and time to money, it's a ranking from 1 to 10. 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And then each MVT that we define has OKRs, objective. What is the hypothesis of this MVT? What are you trying to solve? And how do you measure that? So it's not KPIs, but it's key. What are the key results you are expecting from them? And then based on that, we are able to calculate a score. And so 1 to 10, and we score each part of the die set. So what is the revenue I expect to generate? So in general, we need a benchmark. So usually we take the average, the average revenue on the company. If the company has an average revenue, I don't know, by contract of $20,000, so that's $20,000 is 10. Then what is the impact that? So here you're more judging the tactic. Is this tactic something that you think is going to help you achieve your key result? Then the confidence, you personally, because in the die set score, what I forgot to say, people rank their own MVT. So it's not a collective ranking. I have an MVT, I develop my MVT, and then I do the ranking. We can debate the subject. I don't think it's a good idea to do that now. So basically, we do it for all the scoring, and you score your ideas. So you end up with a series of backlog MVTs with a ranking, and your growth master, that often can be in the organization where we work with, is also the product owner at the same time, doesn't have to basically spend too much time trying to figure out which one should be pushed first into the backlog. Of course, it's a kind of a race, but the scoring is basically the main way to decide what goes into the next backlog, basically.
Well, another concept you brought up was this concept of uncertainty. I mean, most of the time in business, people prefer certainty. I want to know, I ordered this, I paid for it, I want to know it's going to be delivered on this date, and it's going to do this thing. But uncertainty is is a key to agile. Now, what happens when you bring that across the whole organization, the way you do in a growth sprint?
Well, what happened is people, except if you are a very linear business, which still exists, So, for example, there's still people producing can of sodas, There's still people producing cars and planes. But in the digital world where we are, the reality. It's the specificity of a linear business is where you start and where you want to go, and it's very clear. And along the way, you have specific steps. In our digital business, and let's think about any digital organization that you're thinking about. Where they are today and what they are today is far from what they imagined they were going to be. When Zuckerberg started Facebook, he's not thinking about the product we are using today. So what I mean is we want, through this systematic change with growth sprint, we want to first say to people, let's stop to pretend that you have the answer. Okay, let's stop this terrible game for company and this very costly game to pretend you know the outcome of ideas that you have. You don't know the outcome most of the time, if not all the time. So that's the reason the objective is to test no stop. That's the reason we bring this concept of growth sprint, because the uncertainty, 3%, 4%, and you spend hours, days of trying to solve this uncertainty, you have the illusion that you have solved much more than in fact you have solved. Maybe you went from 4% to 5%, but you didn't go from 4% to 80%. So stop wandering around, just test, and learn. The idea, you are not failing if you learn. You are failing if you don't learn. You are failing if you develop something, a feature, and you don't know if your audience like this feature or not, if it makes a difference in your growth or not. That's what you need to know, and the best way to know is to try, and to try step by step, and to sense and respond to the reaction of your audience.
I'm going to interrupt us all here for just a moment. If any of our viewers have questions that they'd like to ask Jeff, please put them in the chat next to this video, and our producer in Brittany, Christelle Lazo, will read them out to us. Chime in with any questions you have. So, Jeff...
Did not lose me. I'm still here.
Okay, sorry, something at this end. One of the keys to this whole concept of sprints and growth sprints is not being afraid to use that circular file folder under your desk, the trash bin, that if something doesn't work, it's great to cut things up into small bits and do this constant testing and have these MVTs, because if it doesn't work, you try it again or throw it out and you haven't destroyed your whole project. You aren't thousands and millions of dollars over budget. Talk to me a little bit about the efficiencies that come out of this, and particularly when you're with a team, how the team members' minds kind of come together to create these efficiencies.
Yeah, maybe I can give two examples that I think are going to be easier to catch the concept through these examples. Companies spend a ton of money and ton of energy on opinions. It's terrible. The money we are losing, the money because of that is incredible, and many companies fail because of the opinion. So let me give you everything. In fact, can be tested, and can be tested fast. Let me give you two examples. So we are working with this media company, and one day one of the senior member of the C-suite comes and explain that the readers, they are old even when they are online, and they love the design of the print newspaper more than the design of the website. And so it would be a great idea to create a reader, an online reader, where they could fold the pages and turn the pages of a PDF version of the newspaper. That would be a great idea. Okay, and then we put together some budget, and it's costly. It's like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and of course we know that once we start the project, they're gonna want to add functionality. Can you select part of the text? Can you save part of the text? So there's non-stop addition to the project. And before we jumped into that, we say, all right, let's do what we are saying we want to do. Let's do an MVT. And so what we did, we simply placed a button at the bottom of each article, okay, where we were inviting people to read the content in a PDF version. And of course, when people click on this button, we did not develop the reader yet. So they had this pop-up window, and we were like simply asking, all right, we are developing this feature. If you want to be part of the VIP group that is going to test this feature, please leave your email address. All we did, that not even 2 hours, and we pushed the button on the next release, and we were just counting, capturing data about the appetite the audience had for this concept. Mm-hmm. First, did they click on the button? 2, did they leave their email in order to be part of this VIP group? And based on the data, we decided to do it or not do it. And the answer was we will not do it because the numbers were ridiculous, and we leave it around for a while. We did not leave it around only for one sprint. We leave it around for 2-3 months to see if the numbers were catching up, and they were not.
I remember that, actually.
Yeah. A second example I can give you, we were working with this this online insurance company that is providing insurance for small and medium business, SMBs, And one of the person were telling us, all right, I'm convinced that if we reduce if we reduce the cost of the insurance by 20%, we will increase by 50% the number of insurance policies that we are going to sell. But I can't do it with your methodology, Jeff. I can't do it in one sprint. I need 6 months to do that. I need 9 months to do that. I can't do it in one sprint. And I say, why you cannot do it in one sprint? It's because she said, I need to do data analysis on the claims of the insurance. It's going to take my team 6 months to do that. Then after I have to present those data analysis to the different insurance companies. And those insurance companies, they're going to have to back up my stuff if I figure out that, yes, the number of the average cost of the claims is below the average cost of the coverage, blah, 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 blah. 10 months later, maybe we will be able to launch or to test the concept, And of course, when you addition all the cost of the team, you are 10 months later and $1 million later.
Yeah.
And I say to them, probably we can have the answer in one sprint. So you can imagine the face of the team where they were pretty statement, And I say, listen, today you are doing Facebook campaign. You have performance today. You know how much policy you are selling through Facebook. Why don't you do a campaign where you just discount the actual policy by 20%? They're like, oh, but it's impossible. We did not negotiate with the insurance company. I said, well, you don't have to. All you want to test is to see if you reduce the price by 20%, do you increase the sales by 50%? You have already the data. It is going to take one sprint to get the answer. See, so basically any big idea can be, before you engage in something that you pretend where you know the outcome, let's be humble. Every day we understand that we need to be humble, and this humility is the systematic approach, systematic change we want to bring into project development, And I know some companies are doing that, and we are pushing this concept that we call the growth sprint. And there's probably other people calling that differently.
Wow. So you've always got this ability to change course, to change direction, to pivot while still maintaining the general direction or the general purpose of why you're doing this. And by doing it in small bits and by doing it in coordination with all the other players, the UX people, maybe HR, maybe your corporate treasury or finance, all these people who may have a stake in this, if they're all involved they may not all be involved in the development part, but if they're all given a stake in the meetings and the outcomes of each thing, then you have the whole company feedback that assures you that this will be more successful than, it's never 100% sure it's success, but more successful than it would be if you deliver something at the end of the day and people say, oh, what's that? I already started tricking Salesforce to do that for me. Or, I wish you had told me earlier, I would have said, add this functionality.
Yeah. Of course, this approach doesn't guarantee success. I'm not selling success. I'm not selling, BS here. This approach, excuse my French, this approach, we are selling a framework to manage uncertainty in the development of a product. So the first step is to recognize there's uncertainty, because if you think that there's no uncertainty, of course, what I'm saying is not of interest for you. Okay, but we pretend that we are always facing uncertainty. So I want to insist, it's not a guarantee of success, it's a guarantee that you have the tools to take decisions that are data-based decisions. It's a guarantee that if you miss the exit fast, and it fast. You don't drive 300 miles and say, oh my God, I missed the exit. No. You have driven 10 miles and you miss the exit. It's very difficult to see teams that are extremely smart, and that are not aligned in the way they are working. They all want success. And it's extremely difficult to see that. It's one of the reasons the growth sprint is something that we are pushing. It's also very difficult to see that business is not always at the heart of the decision. That, for example, how many times I have seen neither something from the dev team, but they are pushing the product first.
Yeah.
why they have pushing the product first. Is it more important to, the product is marketing. So to see this silo, artificial silo that people are putting around their job, it's something that we need to change, The product is the marketing. Once you have created the awareness, then you go into the product, then all of a sudden, the product is part of the conversion funnel, If the product doesn't do what I want the product to do, I'm going to leave, And if I pay for it and I'm disappointed, I'm going to leave. So the point of view of the marketing, the input that the marketing department has to do is permanent. The input that the sales department has to provide is also permanent. The input that the customer success managers and this has to provide is also something that has to be permanent. And because of that, HR has to be part of the equation, because maybe I need different type of people all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. So they can't be like somewhere having their own agenda, Of course, finance has to follow also. Maybe I attributed money to something that is not working, and I should attribute money to something that is working, Yeah. Again, I'm not saying something that is, it's not a revolution, what I'm saying, It's just common sense, And the growth sprint, it's a systematic approach that is a common sense systematic approach. Let's work together. Let's admit there is uncertainty. Let's have a process that can help manage this uncertainty, measure the results, and take decisions that are data-based and not hypo-based.
Yeah. I mean, if you look behind Jeff, you see the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a very great example of linear waterfall kind of thing. They drew up all the plans for everything before they even laid the first stone. 30 some odd miles north of here, right at the edge of a certain municipal border, there's a bridge between New York, upstate New York, called what was called the Tappan Zee Bridge. It's now named for the governor's father. And it was built using much more of a built-in uncertainty plan, where they hadn't finished all the drawings when they started. They knew where the pilings were going to go. They knew where the suspension span was going to go, but they hadn't finished everything else yet. And so they started building, because if they waited for every last piece to be in place, it would add immense costs. And they ended up coming in significantly under budget and making some good and some bad changes. They ended up not putting in a railway link, which people don't like, but it is strong enough to hold one if they do add it. And so you see in the real world or in the non-IT world, you can see this with the same idea of being agile, of constantly testing, of moving ahead, acknowledging uncertainty comes into play. And I just wondered, maybe you can tell us a little more how you can take this out of, the IT department and build it across a company, this whole concept of sprints and uncertainty.
Well, I think it's hard to take anything out of the IT world now because everything is integrated somewhere in your life a little bit less complicated. Let's think about the remote control of a TV. Okay, so when you are comparing the remote control of a TV with the remote control of the Apple TV, you understand what I'm saying. In one end, you have a company Apple that really think about what is essential, and on the other end, you have a bunch of tech guy that decided that it was a good idea to put 257 buttons, a piece of plastic that is about 20 centimeter long and 3 centimeter large. And of course, none of us has a freaking clue about what these buttons are for. All of them, I mean, So how could you
I think that's about 8 inches by 3 inches, just for non-centimetric people.
Yeah, sorry. Even 20 years after being in America, I still have a hard time with those inches, Sorry, my brain is, I'm not that smart, Why don't you create a simple, why not thinking this remote control totally differently, where instead of creating all this hardware that is super complicated, you do that in sprint. People are probably thinking this guy is smoking crack right now. No. So how do you do it? You use a touch screen, so that is probably becoming your phone soon. So we don't have to invent this stuff because the phone is probably becoming step by step the remote. But basically, you have a touch screen and it's software based. So step by step, you can analyze, you can add functionality to the remote control, step by step, just by updating the software. And you can test if people they are using that, and eventually you can do a marketplace. You can do a marketplace where people are adding their own app for the remote control. You want to you are really focused on food programs. There's an app that is directing you on food programs. You want Italian pasta? Okay, I have an app for the Italian pasta, but I don't have a button. Because I would never have enough button, and I would never have the button that you want. That's as simple as that. So that's a concrete example about how this systematic approach of growth sprint changed the way you are thinking about a product. I'm not trying to improve the UX of this evil 237 buttons. I'm rethinking the role of this remote control.
Right, and so you can apply this whole concept to all kinds of things: bridges, remotes, and software development projects.
Yeah,
and it saves you. I mean, tell us a little bit from your clients. I mean, how much money do they save doing things this way?
But you can save millions of dollars at the first sprint. For example, I have one client that is calling me the $5 million guy, and the reason he's calling me the $5 million guy is because at the first sprint he realized that his $5 million idea was not a $5 million idea. And what I mean by $5 million idea, he had to spend $5 million in order to put together this idea. We did one sprint, the result was a disaster, and the guy said, okay, maybe let's do a second one. The result was a disaster also. So clearly, his great idea, it was a great idea, but it was the wrong timing, and the audience was not biting. That as simple as that. So we save a ton by learning and discovering that the direction you are going in is the wrong direction. You are saving not only money, but you are saving your team also, because we forgot sometimes about the impact of doing something. So it's not a miracle pill, I'm not saying it's a miracle pill. It's more common sense, If you can, and I'm not saying it's possible 100% of the time, but most of the time, if you can step by step feel the appetite of the audience, why not doing it? Why just go like for 6 months, 7 months, 1 year, and after 1 year say, cool, it doesn't work. No, you can probably and you are using marketing method to do that. You don't have to develop something to know if there is an appetite for the company, and for your product.
Great. Anything else I should ask you about the concept of introducing growth sprint into your business?
You tell me, Peter. That's your job. You have to interview me, Peter. I'm not the interviewer.
I'm fascinated by it. It makes a lot of sense. I think there's probably a lot that one has to learn in applying it. It doesn't sound like it sounds like one of the hardest things is convincing people outside the IT department that they actually have a stake in this.
Yes,
and getting them to comply. How do you do that?
So basically, we have two tools. It's a great question. We have two tools. And by the way, so we have two tools. One we call the Growth Jam. And so basically, we have been inspired by the work of AG Smart. We say hello to the team at AG Smart. That is a great team doing great stuff, And we took one of the jam that they were making, and we basically oriented the jam in the direction of growth, more growth focus. We have this 90 minutes tool that help people understand the concept. So what we do, we often offer this first 90 minutes, 60-minute exercise to our prospect, for them to not only discover us, but discover the way we think, and have a concrete result, because at the end of this jam, they have a concrete result. They have something that they can take home, even if they don't want to work with us. Okay. Then the second step that we do, it's what we call a growth sprint workshop, And so basically, we have those 2 days workshop where we initiate and at the same time teach the concept of growth sprint to team. And I have to tell you, I've been doing a lot of strategy work for a lot of years, that I don't want to say how many years. And it's the first time that I don't have people opposed to the concept. I have people skeptical, but not opposed. People are saying it's never gonna work, your stuff, and it's very satisfying. So we had those two stuff that we are using, the Growth Jam and the Growth Sprint workshop. By the way, the Growth Jam is available online for free. We have a webinar about it. And soon, and you have all the documentation that goes with it. So if you follow the Growth Jam and you download the documentation, you have everything you need to do it on your own. And I'm going to do the same thing in the next 2 weeks for the Growth Sprint workshop, where I will deliver 2 sessions about how to do a Growth Sprint workshop on your own. And I will deliver all the documentation necessary to do it on your own.
Wow. Jeff, thank you for joining us today. We will be back next Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time with the next edition of DEF CON 19 in PentaLive from Pentalog. I'm Peter Green in New York. This has been Jeff Mignon,